March 5, 1945, over central Germany, altitude 21,000 feet. 5 Bf-109s break from cloud cover closing at 390 imaprim. Ruby Jane, a B-17G, is last in the formation. Isolated, damaged. Number 3 engine smoking. Defensive arcs staggered. Tail section exposed. Time to contact 14 seconds. In the tail turret sits an 18-year-old kid, Dale Winston. First mission, first combat. Never fired a gun outside of training. He's loaded 12 belts of 50 caliber 600 rounds, but his hands are frozen on the triggers. The lead Messerschmitt dives at 23 deg, closing fast from 700 yards. Doctrine says wait. Let the fighter fill the ring, conserve ammo. Trust the pilot to hold level. But the B-17 banks left. The turret swings, the angle breaks. Dale panics. He slams the trigger early. Way early. A full second before angle convergence. The burst goes wide off by 14 degrees. Misses everything, or so he thinks. But one tracer clips the wing root of the lead 109. The fighter jerks, loses lift, and spirals out. It wasn't planned, it wasn't aimed. It was wrong. And that's why it worked. 3 weeks before the mission, Dale Winston stood in the rear gunnery pit at Kingman Army Airfield, Arizona. It was 82 degrees, dry air, perfect visibility. His instructor's voice rang out over the PA target 700 yards crossing left. Dale froze. He over-rotated the practice turret, then hesitated, waiting for the ring to line up perfectly. By the time he fired, the silhouette was already out of range. He missed again. His classmates laughed. One muttered. He waits for a permission slip. Another called him slow trigger. Dale had never hunted, never handled a live weapon before enlisting. His high school rifle team didn't accept freshmen, and he had skipped straight to aviation tech. He passed the written exams. Knew the specs of the 50 cal by heart, 750 rounds per minute. Muzzle velocity 890 feet per second. Effective range 1,000 yards. But when it came to real-time decision-making, he stalled. During simulation drills, he failed the judgment fire test firing at a decoy friendly. His reaction time was clocked at 1.6 seconds. Standard was under 0.8. He didn't qualify for lead tail gunner. But a slot opened in the 94th Bomb Group. 3 gunners rotated out due to frostbite, and they needed a replacement fast. He was pushed forward with a note, low combat readiness. Assign rear if no alternative. First crew briefing, no one trusted him. Waist gunners assigned him the lowest belt count. Flight engineer didn't bother syncing the turret with the top console. Dale just nodded. Quiet. Then came deployment. RAF Boxted. February 28th. First sortie scheduled for March 5th. Target Leipzig Rail Hub. Heavy flak expected. Fighter resistance likely. Dale's tail gun assignment was considered sacrificial buffer. If a 109 came in from the back, he was meant to distract, not survive. And when the crew saw his name on the manifest, one man whispered, "Guess we've got our canary." Then the takeoff was delayed and Dale got moved to the last bomber in the box. Alone. No rear arc overlap. No gunner cover. Tail gunnery in the B-17 wasn't glamorous. It was desperation math. 1 man, 2 Brownings, 600 rounds, a full rear hemisphere to cover at 25,000 feet. Doctrine said, wait until the fighter fills the ring. Don't chase with the turret. Conserve ammo. Let the angles come to you. It worked on paper. In the classroom, instructors showed how to calculate closure rate. At 400 mph, a Bf-109 covered 1,000 yards in just over 8 seconds. That left 3 or 4 seconds of effective engagement. The optimal moment to fire was 350 to 250 yards. Any earlier waste, any later death. But that system assumed perfect conditions, level flight. No banking, no turret lag. Reality was messier. On Ruby Jane's final training run, the crew drilled evasive maneuvers. A steep left bank at 18,000 feet caused the tail turret to misalign by 11 degrees for over 3 seconds. The instructor noted it during defensive maneuvering. Tail coverage may lapse. May it always did. Dale had memorized every manual. Knew the line shoot with purpose, not panic. But no manual addressed what to do if your bomber banked mid-engagement, or if your firing arc shifted right as you lined up the perfect shot, or if you were the only gunner in the last ship, and 5 BF-109s had picked you as the soft kill. He trained under simulation rules, predictable runs, clean visuals, no smoke, no crew screaming in your headset. But now, he'd be flying solo in the dead cone. No turret overlap, no backup fire, just him and the rear sky. His weakness cautious. Late firing had been mocked as hesitation, but in training, it preserved ammo. He was told, only rookies fire blind. That phrase stuck with him. So when the call came, enemy fighters approaching from 6 o'clock high, Dale did what he was taught. He waited. And waited. And when the bomber banked, his shot window collapsed just as all 5 fighters dropped in at 22,000 feet and 8 seconds to impact, at 21 to 200 feet over central Germany. Ruby Jane was drifting east of formation. Flak over Leipzig had scattered the group. 3 bombers had dropped early. 2 were hit and limping north. That left Dale's bird trailing alone, last in the box, tail exposed. The worst place for a rookie. 5 BF-109s approached from 500 feet in a high stagger formation. Altitude difference 300 feet, attack angle 24 degrees, airspeed 390 mph, closure rate 160 yards per second, at initial visual contact. Dale had just 10 seconds before the first enemy reached gun range. The geometry was stacked against him. A BF-109 diving from above didn't fly straight. It curved, rolled, and spiraled in at unpredictable trajectories. Dale's turret, already slightly misaligned from the pilot's evasive roll, lagged behind the fighters by nearly 9 degrees. To compensate, he began a swing-right motion, but the fighters fanned out. The lead 109 took center. 2 peeled off left, 1 right. 1 climbed briefly before diving again. A classic split V feint. It overwhelmed tail defenses, forcing a gunner to guess wrong. Dale hesitated. He tracked the lead. The turret couldn't rotate fast enough. At 500 yards, the first fighter dropped flares, mocking a shallow dive. Dale fired too early. His first burst went wide by over 14 degrees, entirely off pattern. The ring wasn't filled. He knew it. He fired anyway, a rookie mistake. But flares masked the real target. One of the flanking 109s suddenly rolled toward centerline, accelerating down Dale's blind spot. He overcompensated, swung hard left. Recoil rattled the scope. Angle shift was too sharp. He was now behind the enemy path. It looked hopeless. Geometry had failed him. Time had failed him. Or so he thought. Because one tracer from that wide, panicked burst hit something. Smoke trailed from the lead fighter's wing. It pitched hard left, lost lift, and dropped through cloud. The attack should have started then. But the Germans hesitated, and in that split-second delay, Dale recentered and saw 2 more closing at 600 yards, only 4 seconds out. The first burst was a mistake. Dale knew it. Fired too soon, too wide, before the angle was right. But war didn't care about perfect technique. 1 round caught the wing root of the lead BF-109, rupturing the intake and spilling black smoke across the sky. The German pilot broke formation immediately, pulling hard left, diving toward the clouds. First contact neutralized. The shock was instant. The 4 remaining fighters split, forming an improvised diamond. 2 dropped low. 1 banked wide right. The 4th took the high left angle, looking for Dale's blind zone. But they were late. That flinch, the 1.2-second hesitation after seeing their lead go down, bought Ruby Jane time. Just enough. Dale, surprised by his own hit, almost froze again, but instinct overrode training. He recentered the turret, dragged the reticle across the path of the right flanker, and squeezed a second burst. This time, 5 of 11 rounds connected. 2 sparked off the canopy. 1 hit the port wing. The fighter rolled, overcorrected and stalled. It dropped behind the bomber's path, struggling to recover. Kill or not. It was out of the fight, 2 down. 3 remained, and they were angry. The next attack came fast. The low pair turned aggressive. 1 dove under the tail and looped up, baiting Dale to follow. The other accelerated into a side slip, pressing from 5 o'clock high exactly where the tail gun couldn't traverse without pilot-roll coordination. Dale tracked both, picked the wrong one. He swung high too slow. The low attacker fired. 20mm rounds stitched Ruby Jane's belly. 1 hit the waist window. Shattered glass. Shouted voices on intercom. Smoke in the rear. Dale swung back, but his turret stalled mid-arc. Hydraulic grind. Red light on the control panel. System jammed. He reached for the override. Nothing. No swing, no traverse, no shot. The last 3 fighters were now in formation, locked, loaded, and coming back around at 19,000 feet and closing fast. The Luftwaffe pilots knew the B-17's weaknesses. After hundreds of missions flown and lost, they had learned where the flying fortress bled. Tail gunners like Dale were dangerous but predictable, trained to track centerline, trained to conserve ammo, and above all, trained to rotate into the target, not out of phase. So the Germans changed. On the second pass, they came in staggered, not stacked. 1 circled from high 4 o'clock, outside the turret's horizontal traverse limit. Another approached from low 5, ready to dart under the belly. The third stayed above, baiting a false track just outside the fire cone. They weren't hunting kills, they were hurting Dale's turret, making him spin, making him late. He tried to swing left to track the low diver, but the jam was getting worse. The turret shuddered. A red flicker on the clutch control flashed. It meant hydraulic pressure was collapsing. Dale shouted on intercom. Turret locked. No swing. No response. Intercom was gone. The last burst had shredded wiring through the fuselage. The waist gunners tried to help. 1 fired wildly through the broken window. The other shouted a heading but couldn't see the dive pattern. 1 of the 109s pulled vertical and then snapped into a corkscrew. The evasive drill was clean, controlled. It was a decoy. That's when the real attack came, from directly underneath. A belly shot. Dale's turret was blind from 6 o'clock low, and with the jam, he couldn't track in time. The German gunner fired a short burst. 20mm rounds punched through the underbelly. 1 hit the rear oxygen tank. Another grazed the turret base. Shrapnel exploded into the compartment. Dale's right boot was torn open, not from the blast, from the clutch plate popping under pressure. Blood on his sock, smoke in the bay. Ammo belt jammed. Only 9 rounds left. The bomber shuddered. Ruby Jane was dropping altitude. Number 3 engine flaming out. The Germans circled, tightening the kill ring, and Dale's turret was dead at 12 degrees right. 100 feet. Airspeed dropping. Ruby Jane's nose dipped as number 3 engine lost full pressure. Vibrations shook the frame, and the oxygen alarm flashed once before the entire electrical panel behind Dale flickered out. The tail turret hydraulics gone. The traverse motor seized at 12 degrees right. Elevation frozen just below level. It was over. The turret had become a coffin. He kicked at the foot pedals, nothing. The right boot torn open. Sock bloodied slipped on the smooth deck. The ammo feed clattered, belt warped. The reload lever hung loose, bent from shrapnel. He had 9 rounds chambered, then nothing. The second pass from the Germans had hit everything vital: oxygen, intercom, hydraulic lines, tail trim. They'd dissected the B-17 from below. Textbook precision. Then he saw it. 109 broke from the loop and leveled at 400 yards, position 5 o'clock low. Perfect angle to slice the tail off with a short burst. Dale knew the specs. That cannon, MG-151-20, fired 750 rounds per minute. 1 hit to the elevator and Ruby Jane would flat spin before anyone could bail. No turret traverse, no elevation correction, no ammo feed. The manual said in case of total failure, turret is to be abandoned. But Dale remembered something from maintenance rotation. Cold clutch float. Not in the gunnery manual, not taught. Only mentioned once by a mechanic in Boxted if you killed power to the turret and unlocked the clutch pins. The entire assembly would swing freely with inertia, uncontrolled. No recoil dampening, no angle locks, meant for ground testing only. He flipped the override panel and pulled the red kill tab. The turret lurched. Now! Every movement required full body weight. He twisted left. Gravity dragged the barrels past center. The crosshairs drifted uselessly in space. The 109 was coming in, now just 270 yards and climbing. Dale didn't track. He didn't aim. He guessed. He let the barrels float with the curve of the bomber's descent. And just before the path crossed the attack vector, he fired. The burst ripped out. 9 rounds. 4 hit nothing. 2 struck the airframe. 1 blew past the cockpit, but the last 2 snapped straight through the intake cowling. The 109's prop sputtered. Then silence. It dropped away. But Dale had no ammo, no control, and 1 more fighter climbing back in. What Dale did should have killed him. The cold clutch float was never intended for combat. It was a ground test feature, a fallback method for maintenance crews to swing the turret freely during servicing. When engaged, it cut all hydraulic dampening. There was no resistance, no braking, just raw momentum. In flight, with turbulence and recoil, 1 misaligned burst could shear the mount or spin the turret uncontrollably. That's why it wasn't in the combat manual. But Dale had no other option. With the electric drive shot and the turret locked at 12 degrees right, he manually disengaged the clutch, a move that took 14 pounds of pull pressure. The turret groaned as the pins retracted. From that point on, it became a pendulum. Not a weapon, just a mass swinging in the wind. He didn't aim by sight. He couldn't. The elevation gears were stuck 3 degrees low. The bubble sight was cracked, so he guessed the intercept. He waited until the bomber's descent arc would carry the floating turret into alignment with the 109's climb path. It was a gamble that required perfect timing. There was no second chance. The recoil from the burst nearly spun the turret sideways. With no hydraulic balance, Dale had to brace his left boot against the armor plate to prevent a full spin. His shoulder slammed into the side rail. But the burst was enough. 2 rounds hit critical. And in that moment, the turret finally proved useful, not because it was working, but because it was broken. He tried to reload, but the belt was torn. His gloves slipped on the link housing. He had 3 rounds in a side canister, but no time to hand feed them. Below, the last fighter banked for another pass. It wasn't fooled. It had seen the turret swing wild. It had seen the ammo dry up. Now it came in slow, lining up a kill shot at 800 yards. And Dale had nothing but a dead weapon and a turret full of broken rules. 600 yards. The final BF-109 wasn't rushing. It had time. It had position. From 6 o'clock low, it crept upward in a shallow climb, just beneath Ruby Jane's tail. Speed, 320 mph. Closure rate slowed to 70 yards per second. The pilot had likely seen the last of Dale's burst and assumed correctly that the tail gunner was empty. Dale watched through the cracked sight bubble. His ammo box was dead. Belt jammed. No feed. Just 3 50-caliber rounds loose in the side tray. No time for a proper reload. No belt tension. No ratchet pull. Only one option remained: manual chamber load. He reached down with his right hand, fumbled the first round. It slipped, bounced under the footrail. No time to retrieve it. 2 left. 400 yards. He tilted the receiver forward, pulled the charging handle with his left. It stuck halfway, resistance from metal distortion. He slammed it again, chambered the second round, fired. 1 round spat out, no recoil buffer, no auto cycle. He yanked the charging handle again. 300 yards. The fighter was leveling, moving slightly right, trying to position under the belly. It was going for the elevator kill. One hit, and Ruby Jane would start spinning uncontrollably. The left wing already smoked from a glancing pass earlier. They wouldn't survive a second one. Dale chambered the third and last round. Couldn't look through the sight. Turret had swung free and off-center from the recoil. He aimed by feel. No time for finesse, just angle and hope. 200 yards. He pulled the trigger. The last 50 cal round cracked through the air. Muzzle velocity 890 feet per second. Distance to target 600 feet. Hit. The round punched through the windscreen, ripped across the cockpit, and the BF-109 flinched, nose dipped, but the engine kept spinning. Not a kill, not clean, but the pilot lost nerve. He peeled right, then down. Dale saw the canopy flash. The German bailed, 3 fighters neutralized, 2 scattered, all with a half-dead turret, 9 good rounds, and a forbidden override. But now Ruby Jane was falling. Number 3 engine gone, left rudder unresponsive, cabin filled with smoke. The intercom crackled, someone shouting about fire in the waist section. Fuel pressure low, altitude 17,300 feet and dropping. Dale turned the turret manually, slowly, with both hands. No more threats, just retreating shapes and leaking sky. His hands bled from the recoil plate, shoulders bruised, still alive. The air quieted, then the pilot's voice cut in, tail status. Dale keyed the switch. Static. Again. Tail. Do we have a path out? No idea. But in the distance, he saw the Group 3 silver dots climbing back toward formation. Allies. He grabbed the sight, dragged the turret forward by force, and watched as those dots turned, escorting Ruby Jane home. The fight was over. But when they landed, the crew chief saw the turret damage and immediately called command. Ruby Jane limped toward the English coast, escorted by 2 P-47s and a single P-51 from a splinter patrol. Airspeed 175 mi. Altitude bleeding steadily now, 14,800 feet, 1 engine dead, 1 leaking. Fuel pressure in the left tank had dropped below 15 psi. They had 12 minutes of flight time left if wind conditions held. But it wasn't just fuel. The crew inside was shaken. Waist gunner Brown had taken a shard of glass through the thigh. Radio operator Martinez was out cold oxygen failure when his mask line was severed by flak. Top turret gunner reported 0 rounds left. The electrical system that powered Dale's tail turret had been fried beyond recognition. Every fuse behind Station 6.5 was blackened. And Dale. His hands were bloodied from forcing the turret. His shoulder was dislocated from the recoil slam. He couldn't lift his right arm, but he stayed in the turret, scanning, eyes locked on the rear, half expecting one last pass from a shadowed enemy. That pass never came. They crossed the North Sea at 11,200 feet. RPMs on Engine 2 dipped to 1,500. They radioed Boxted, no answer. Signal line broken. Backup frequency worked barely. Their ETA was now 19 minutes. Then the final threat appeared. A radar warning from a forward outpost signaled 2 bogies, 9 o'clock low, 15 miles out. Possible WWIIs returning from another raid. Not confirmed. Fighters scrambled, but they were still 8 minutes away. Ruby Jane was now 20 miles from base. Altitude 9,700 feet. No ammo, no turret. 1 gunner unconscious. The rest down to sidearms and hope. Then cloud cover rolled in. For 90 seconds. Ruby Jane vanished from enemy sight lines. When they emerged, there were no bogies. The final threat, if it had ever been real, had missed them in the fog. At 3,200 feet, wheels down. Ruby Jane came in hard. The landing gear screamed, the left wheel buckled slightly but held. The bomber skidded 50 feet before settling into dead silence on the tarmac. Emergency crews raced in. Medics pulled out Martinez and Brown. Mechanics surrounded the tail, and one officer, Major Cates, climbed into the turret. When he stepped out, he simply said, "What the hell happened back here?" The turret was frozen. Housing cracked, clutch override active, and the ammo belt snapped halfway through the feed guide. 2 hours after Ruby Jane touched down, the flight crew stood on the edge of the tarmac, watching mechanics strip the tail turret open. The armor plate was warped 3 degrees. The recoil guide rails were cracked. One technician pulled the ammo belt with pliers. It came out in pieces. The internal mount had a hairline fracture where the cold clutch override had slammed sideways under live fire. The damage was obvious. This turret had been used in a way no manual allowed. Dale sat on a stretcher nearby, shoulder-bound, glove off, knuckles split open. He kept quiet. The debrief began at 1845 hours in the operations trailer. Major Cates read from the flight log. Enemy contact at 21,000 feet, 5 BF-109s. 2 confirmed down, 1 probable. Tail section sustained multiple hits, 1 engine out. Crew casualties 2 injured. Then he paused, looked up. Tail gunner fired 12 rounds, no belt reload, reported turret jam, used cold clutch to reposition and fire manually. Silence. The intelligence officer narrowed his eyes. "That's not protocol," Cates replied. "It worked." But the clerk beside him muttered, "It's not in the gunnery book. That override's not rated for flight." They debated for 7 minutes. Words like reckless, unauthorized, and non-standard application came up. But then the lead mechanic stepped into the room, holding a camera reel. Gun camera footage, tail-mounted, still partially functional during the engagement. They played it. There it was. The corkscrew dive. The first shot that hit the lead fighter. The staggered split. Then the turret shift slow, unnatural. A pause, and 1 clean burst. Target down. They played the final shot 3 times. Manual fire. 1 tracer. 1 direct hit through the canopy. Enemy bailout confirmed. Bailout. The room was silent. The commanding officer closed the file. "We're not logging that maneuver," he said. "Last thing we need is rookies thinking broken turrets are battlefield assets." He handed the report to the adjutant. "Market mechanical malfunction. Damage control successful. Pilot evasive actions credited." Dale wasn't mentioned. Not in the citation. Not in the log. Not in the recommendation for sortie commendation. But 1 line remained in the crew's handwritten report. Tail gunner unknown technique. Saved the aircraft. 2 weeks after Ruby Jane's battered return, Dale was grounded for shoulder recovery. His official duty record listed non-combat injury during mechanical failure. A line that told nothing. But the crew knew. The waist gunners retold the fight every time a new group arrived at Boxted. "You hear about the kid with the busted turret. Took down 3 109s with half a belt and no hydraulics." The story spread quietly. Across England, other gunnery crews began to whisper about free spin mode. Not officially, not during briefing, but in the downtime late at night. Around map tables or over greasy ammo trays, someone always asked, "What if your turret locks up mid-flight? Can it still swing?" That's when one of the veterans would nod and mention Dale's move. Cold clutch, no damping. You better brace your teeth if you fire. Within 3 months, 2 separate crews, one from the 91st Bomb Group, another from the 457th, reported successful defensive bursts using partial clutch disengagement after hydraulic loss. Neither had training for it. Both credited unofficial tips from Boxted gunners. The technique was never written down. No manual change, no formal lesson plan. But in early 1945, when a B-24 rear turret jammed during a retreat over Frankfurt, the tail gunner, 19 years old, fresh from gunnery school, grabbed the kill tab without hesitation. He'd heard the story. Had trained under a sergeant who flew with Ruby Jane's crew. One guess what maneuver he used. The German fighter didn't survive. Back at Boxted, Dale returned to light maintenance. He never flew combat again. But when recruits cycled through turret inspection drills, he was sometimes asked to talk through the hydraulic shutoff. Quietly. Never in front of officers. By spring, the turret override mechanism on certain B-17s was being reinforced unofficially by crews who'd heard it might matter someday. And in at least 7 confirmed cases, it did. Dale Morgan was honorably discharged in September 1945. He returned to Missouri with a rebuilt shoulder, partial hearing loss, and no official commendation. His discharge papers listed tail gunner, 8th Air Force non-combat technical injury. Not a single mention of enemy fighters, not a word about the turret. But Ruby Jane's crew never forgot. The B-17 herself was scrapped in January 1946, her frame too warped to retrofit. The tail turret was removed by ground crews used for classroom demos, stripped of firing gear, and bolted to a static display mount in a training hangar at Thurley. Recruits walked past it for years, unaware it had once spun freely at 19,000 feet with a gunner who broke every rule to keep her alive. But the story lived on, not in books, not in orders, in stories, mess halls, cold airfields, a question whispered during downtime. What do you do if the turret seizes up mid-pass? Some would shake their heads, others would grin. A few would say, "You float it, just once, just enough." The term cold clutch trick never appeared in manuals. It never got a name, but it made its way across the Atlantic in minds and muscle memory. A few gunners tried it on test runs, usually on grounded birds. They called it suicidal, insane, impossibly lucky. But 6 aircraft and over 50 crew members would make it home alive by 1945 because someone remembered Dale never flew again. He took up farming, raised 3 kids, never spoke much about the war. But when his oldest son joined the Air Force in 1963, Dale gave him one piece of advice before boot camp. If the manual says you can't turn it, it might still turn. His son never understood. Not then. But somewhere, deep in the recesses of training halls and old-timer stories, the maneuver survived, unnamed, unlisted, unofficial. Just a memory of the day an 18-year-old with no combat kills, no ammo left, and a seized turret used a forbidden override to swing his guns and drop 3 German fighters before the sky went quiet.